Welcome to the official How to Play video for Meek Heroes Victory, designed by Joe Bragg and illustrated by Jason David Light. In this biblically inspired game, the city is under demonic oppression. You are called into battle to wage spiritual warfare against dark principalities and be the first to banish them back to the dark below. Build up your character's battle deck with holy armaments, install batteries into your combat mech to stand toe-to-toe with colossal enemies, and call upon powerful allies to take back the streets in this urban and futuristic tug-of-war for souls. Meek Heroes Victory supports 2 to 4 players and can be played between 45 and 90 minutes. To set up, first start by shuffling the player mats and randomly deal 1 to each player face up. Each player will then take the pawn, the 5 discs, and the 10 starting hand cards that match their player mat color, along with the matching mech and a reference card. Place the mech with the charge mech side face up. Shuffle the upgrade cards, the ones with the orange arrow in the lower right hand corner, and randomly place 2 rows of 4 cards face up to form the pasture. Players will be able to purchase cards from the pasture to enhance their deck abilities. More on that in a moment. Next, shuffle the ally deck, and above the pasture, lay out 1 row of 4 ally cards face up. These ally cards remain face up in this spot for the rest of the game unless players pay to exchange them, which we will learn about later. Next, to form the boss row, take the auto loss reserve, henchmen, agents, and principalities cards and shuffle them independently to form their own decks. Place these decks above the allies row. Make separate piles of each of the gemstone resources and place them above the boss cards row. Place the victory bonus card next to the boss row and place the red die on top of it. Make sure the side you have face up is set for the proper player count. The player who most recently volunteered in their community goes first. Each player mat has 5 spaces to move your pawn. On your turn, you'll move from your current location to a new location, gather resources, and take the actions there. Now, each of these spaces functions a little bit different from each other, so make sure you're paying attention as I explain each one. On their turn, players place their character pawn on one of the 5 city spaces of their player mat: Emeralds, Jasper, Onyx, Sapphire, or Battle a Boss. Players must move at the start of their turn. They're not allowed to take the actions or benefits from a city space they started on. When a player moves to a new city space, that player first takes the number of resources offered by the space, after which they may resolve the actions printed at the bottom. Now, depending on the space, players will do something slightly different. When the player moves to the Emerald space, they take 3 emeralds. They then may either take 1 resource of their choice from the supply once per turn, or trash 1 non-auto loss card from their deck once per turn. And I'm going to explain what auto loss cards are and how they work in a little bit. When a player moves to the Jasper space or the Onyx space, they will first take those resources. Then, once per turn, the player may purchase 1 card from the pasture and trade 2 of their resources for any 1 resource. Now, looking at the pasture cards, these are the powerful cards that players will be adding to their deck as the game progresses. To purchase a card, players simply spend the required number of resources on the top right of the card and add that card directly to their deck. The empty pasture slot is immediately filled with another card from the pasture deck. Pasture cards have a strength point value, or SP, that determines its power in battle. Pasture cards also have a benefit, so be sure to pay attention to the pasture card text at all times. Your deck is going to be shuffled and drawn at the time of battling a boss. For reference, players are always allowed to look through their deck at any time, but always remember to shuffle them before each boss battle begins. Now, man does not live on pasture cards alone. Your character also gets a unique ability that they are allowed to use once per boss battle, so be sure you're paying attention to how and when to best utilize those. Now, since ally cards that were placed during setup remain on the table for the entirety of the game unless exchanged, players can use an ally's ability anytime during a boss battle by paying the required amount of resources on the card. The ally card is not discarded after its use. Allies can be used multiple times in battle unless otherwise stated on the card, so long as the player is able to cover the cost of its resources. It is also important to note that some allies, like Yo, Take a Break, or Traitor, are used before another player takes a turn or battles, so be sure to read the card if those allies are in play. When a player moves to the Sapphire space, they take 2 Sapphire and may either purchase a card from the pasture, or spend resources to install 1 battery into their mech, or spend 2 of each resource to exchange one of the ally cards from the row with any one of their choice from the deck. This is the only way to swap out ally cards from the existing lineup. Though the allies and pasture cards can be incredibly powerful, thankfully you also get full access to a massive multi-billion-dollar mech that you can charge up and gain an advantage over the bosses. The mech is just a titanic chunk of metal by itself. However, by spending resources at the Sapphire City space, you can install batteries into your mech. Each installed battery counts as 2 SP in battle, and once it's fully charged, you will start every battle with a solid 10 SP, and you may negate 1 single auto loss card per battle with the use of the mech. If a player is feeling confident in their deck of purchased cards, they may choose to move to the Battle a Boss space on their turn and attempt to redeem or banish a boss depending on the level. The bosses, henchmen, agents, and principalities must be handled in that order. Players must redeem 3 henchmen before moving on to the 2 agents, and then 2 agents before moving on to the principalities. The first player to then banish 2 principalities immediately wins the game. To initiate a boss battle, players move to the Battle a Boss space and draw the top card from the deck of their current required boss level. Their first boss will always be a henchman. Each boss has a number in the top left-hand corner stating its SP or strength points. To attempt to redeem them, the challenging player first shuffles their entire deck of cards. Then, one at a time, reveals the top card of their deck, comparing the strength points of their cards against the bosses. The player is only allowed to draw a maximum of 5 cards per battle unless they reveal cards that allow them to continue drawing. If the player cannot meet or exceed the boss's SP within the allotted card draws, they lose the battle. Players also lose if during their card draw they reveal an auto loss card. This immediately ends the battle and results in the player defeat. Unless the auto loss card was somehow negated, of course. Any additional abilities or instructions on revealed cards are followed as long as they apply to the battle. For example, some cards may allow you to draw resources during a battle, which could open a door for you to then use the ability of an ally. If the player loses the battle by revealing an auto loss card, they place that auto loss card face up and partially visible underneath the boss card, which bolsters the boss's SP in future battles. The boss remains in front of the player that drew it until they are redeemed or banished, and an undefeated boss must be dealt with before drawing another one. Regardless of how a player loses a battle, whether it's an auto loss card or simply by not revealing enough cards to overcome the boss's SP, on their first loss, they must obey the first loss penalty on the boss card. Just as it sounds, this penalty only applies to the first loss against a particular boss. If you are unable to pay the penalty, you have dodged a bullet and should praise God for his grace and mercy amidst defeat. In the event that a player is successful in redeeming or banishing a boss, they keep the boss card as a reference to the number of required boss types they defeated. They then roll the victory bonus die once and gain the reward on the victory bonus card that corresponds to the number rolled. You do not roll the victory bonus die for defeating principalities. After the battle, players gather all played cards, leaving any auto loss cards under undefeated bosses, and return those cards to their deck. When a player redeems or banishes a boss that has an auto loss card under it, that auto loss is returned to the deck along with the other played cards. Beware as you continue to redeem henchmen and agents and get closer to banishing the hellish principalities, your road will become even narrower. After redeeming the 3 henchmen, players add 1 auto loss card from the reserve to their deck. After redeeming 2 agents, players will add 2 auto loss cards from the reserve to their deck. Thankfully, there are enough ways to deal with auto loss cards, which is nice because in order to come out on top, you'll occasionally need to push your luck. Even if you defeat a boss in under 5 cards, you can continue to draw cards for as many draws as you're allowed, which could reward you with additional resources or a chance to engage with one of your opponents. However, beware the deadly sin of greed. If you draw an auto loss card during your card draw binge, you will lose the entire battle, undoing all of your hard work. Unless, of course, you can negate the auto loss card. When an auto loss card is negated, it does not count toward one of your 5 cards drawn, and there are a number of ways in the game to negate auto-loss cards. And as I said, immediately after a player banishes 2 principalities, they win the game. And that's how you play Meek Heroes Victory, a deceptively simple, approachable, deck-building, push-your-luck game with some fun elements of worker placement and resource management. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to check out meekheroes.com to grab your copy and let us know in the comments what you thought of the game. If you would like a professionally produced content video for your board game, please reach out to me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.